Today we are going to do codes for inheritance mapping, in which we will cover table per subclass mapping, table per class mapping, and table per concrete class mapping. So we already discussed the theory part in the previous video. So today let's do the code for table per subclass mapping. What is going to happen in table per class mapping? Table per subclass mapping. We have to create table per subclass. So how we are going to do that? And then when we are going to create table for suppose student and current student, then there must be relationship between those two, because both of these are in inheritance relationship. So we are going to use foreign key relationship between these two. We have to establish foreign key relationship between student and current student. Suppose the student's SID is going to be in relationship, foreign key relationship, with current student CID. So in current student table, we have to create CID column, which is going to be in relationship with the SID column of student. Likewise for every classes. So first let's create the student table in our Eclipse. Let's copy and paste so we can reduce some codes writing in our videos. So for code 4, which is inheritance mapping, or let's don't write inheritance mapping, let's write it's table per sub class mapping. Let's close everything first. In table per subclass mapping, which is inheritance mapping, first we want to have students. So we already have a students table, a student class in which we have students with annotation. So here we have SID. Let's convert into the SID. We have SID name, phone, email of a student. And let's delete this collection mapping thing. And generate getter and setters. Select all. So we have students. Let's create the current student. So copy and paste the student. Name it as current student. In current student, suppose we are going current student, first of all let's change the table name that current student class is going to create, and current student have to extend student, and we can't provide the same things because these are already coming from the super class. So let's give some new values like string name. So current student may have batch ID, or maybe first batch. If there is a student in any institute, then that current student may have batch timing. So timing, let it be of type, or let it be of type string. That's all. So we have batch and timing in current student. Let's make the constructor and getter and setters. So now remember the thing right here. Whenever you are creating the subclass in case of inheritance mapping, then you must have to pass the values to the superclass. Why? Just so your database can be in readable format. If you don't provide, then there is not going to be any error or exception, but you have to read out your database with understanding. For that purpose, you have to provide the values that are coming from the super type. So current student extends student. So we have batch and timing in current student, batch and timing in current student, but these names, name long and email is coming from super type. So also provide that inside the constructor. Then use getter and setter. So we have used getter and setters. There must be default constructor. In default constructor, in default current student constructor, let's create the old student. Copy paste old student. So in old student, here is the old student. What we can have, suppose there is old student of any institute, then he can have number of times he is been interviewed, or maybe company he is placed in company. So the company he got placement inside. So another thing he can have is number of times he gave the interviews. Interview. It should be of type integer. And here we have to again create getter, constructor, and getter and setters. Create the constructor. Remember to create the constructor with the superclass of variables that are coming when you are extending the student. And getter and setters. Now let's create the classes that is going to extend current student. So we created current student and old student, that is extending student. Now we have to create weekday student and weekend student, that is going to extend current student. Basically weekday students are the daily students, and weekend students are some students that attend the classes on Saturday and Sundays, you can say that. So for that, let's copy the current student and create weekday student, and inside the weekday student what we can have inside the weekday student. Maybe attendance, not attendance, batch time of weekday student. Suppose before batch time for weekday, you can write that variable batch time for weekday student, and we can have batch for weekday student. You can say batch for weekday student. Or what we can write here, weekday B time, weekday batch time, and weekday batch. Let's create the setters and getters. Again, remember to create constructor in which we have super type of values fields. Now we have to create weekend student. So in weekend student, so weekday spelling is wrong. It is going to be like this. Finish. In weekend student, just change the weekday by week end. Weekend batch time and weekend batch. Create the constructor. Getters and setters. So now we have to write our client code. Let's create other things. We will write those by ourselves. Create code to delete code. Here you can see we have a student which is extended by old student and current student, and current student got extended by weekday student and weekend student. So there is something wrong that we did. Weekday student should have to extend current student. Current student, and then we have to make constructor and setters and getters again because we made a mistake. And also in weekend student, it have to extending current student. Just make the constructors setters and getters. So till now what we have did is we created a student, current student, old student. Current student get extended by weekday student and weekend student, and we are working on table per subclass mapping, which means every class is going to have its own table And whenever we are going to insert table inside the subclass, then first in the superclass data is going to get inserted, then in current student data is going to get inserted, then data will be inserted inside the weekday student. So these are the two things you have to remember. For every table, every class table is going to be created, and whenever we are going to insert data, first data will be inserted inside the table student table, current student table, weekday student table. These are the 2 points, and there should be some relationship between these two table and all others. So to establish the relationship, we are going to use foreign key. So from the student, we are going to use SID, and from current student, we are going to use CID. So for that, let's do the annotation first. So we already have annotation inside the student. In current student, we also have annotation. In all student, we have to change the name for the table that is going to get created. In weekday student, we have to change the table name. Also in the weekend student, we have to change the table name that is going to be get created. So for every particular subclass, table is going to create. Now let's do the relationship between SID and CID. For that, first we have to mention in the student, because it is the subclass, annotation in inheritance, and in inheritance we have to mention strategy. Strategy is equal to inheritance type dot joined. Inheritance type joined. Not like this, joined have to be constant. Here you go, joined. So for table per subclass mapping, you have to mention this line, inheritance, and in strategy, inheritance type is joined. For table per subclass, you have to mention inheritance type join. So here is the joined inside current student. What we have to write here is at primary key column name is going to be CID. So what is going to happen? Inside this table current student, there is going to be column CID, which is going to be with the relationship in foreign key relationship with SID column of student table. Listen me again. This column CID is going to be available inside the current student table, which will be in the relationship foreign key relationship with SID column of student table. Again, just for the old student, primary key column, name it. Inside the old student table, we are going to have OID, represents old student ID. So this OID is going to be inside the table old student, and it is going to be in relationship, foreign key relationship with SID. of student table, exactly like we can do this in the weekday student. What will happen right here? Primary key column name is going to be, suppose, week WD ID, weekday student ID. Copy this, and weekend student, we have to provide weekend student ID. Just remember where I am providing these annotations, just before the class name. Here you can see just before the class, on top of class, after the table. So table is going to created with this name, and inside that table we are going to have CID for the current student class, and this CID is going to be in foreign key relationship with this SID column of student. So for every class we have mentioned the foreign key relationship. Now let's make our create code. So before that, let's see what is our database is set to. So we are working with study database. Let's remove all the tables that are there inside this study database. For that, let's drop the database study first. Let's create database study. Use this study. Now it's time for create code. So here is the normal lines of code that you know these are doing what. Each line I have explained to you. So let's do what we want to do here. We have to first create the student, or maybe let's don't create the student. Let's see if we are going to insert the data in this table, weekday student table, the corresponding table of this class, then that data should have to be first get inserted inside the student, then current student, then weekday student. So let's first insert data inside the weekday student and see is that those data are available inside the student and current student or not. So in our create code, we want to create for weekday student and weekday student is equal to new, and use the parameterized constructor. So data will move to the upper classes through this constructor, because remember in weekday student we only have weekday by time and weekday batch. Weekday batch, or let it be right there. We only have weekday batch time and weekday batch, but here we have these much variables. So from where these variables are coming from? These are coming from the current student and also from the students, because the variables inside the students are inside the current student, and all those variables then again coming in weekday student. So we have to provide the values inside every of these, so our data can be get inserted inside the student as well as student. If we are not going to do that, if we are only going to provide the values of the variables available in the weekday student with the constructor, right now we don't have that constructor, but if we are going to provide the values in only these two variables through the constructor, then value are not going to be shown inside these both student and current student. So we are using the constructor that can send the values in the superclass. So what is this? Let me write it again. Okay, its name Raj, phone number, email, gmail.com, batch. So this batch is from maybe current student. Let's write first. Maybe B34 is some batch. Timing is 2 p.m. Now weekday batch time. So let's write the WD, which represent weekday, B1 maybe. So WD represent weekday and batch is, so this is batch time. So batch time is 2:30 p.m. and batch is weekday, B1 maybe. Let's see what will happen. There is some error. Maybe these are of type string. Let's save with the session object and save method. Okay. What will happen when we are going to run table for every class will be generated for student, current student, old student, weekday student and weekend student. For every student class there will be a table with the corresponding columns. Let's run. So we got some error. What is that? Unknown entity study weekday student. Okay, I got that idea. So in the case of, whenever we are trying, in the case of inheritance mapping, we are trying to create tables for every class. For every class, you can see here. So what we have to do, we have to mention in the configuration, in the Hibernate configuration document, we have to mention that we are making tables for these particular classes. So mention all the classes right here. What classes we have? We have current student, we have old student, we have weekday student, we have weekend student. For all these classes we want corresponding tables. Now let's run this. So we are running the subclass, which is the lowest in the hierarchy. So data should be inserted inside the student, current student, and then weekday student. Let's see. We also got error again. Let's see again. Maybe it will work. There are some spelling errors inside the Hibernate configuration that I did. I fixed those. So now it is working. Here you can see table will be created for current student, old student, and every student, and then alter statement is issued, which is adding constant foreign key on CID and references is SID. What I told, that this CID column is getting created inside the current table, current student table, and it is in this relationship, foreign key relationship of SID of student table. Likewise, in every class, this happened. And let's see in MySQL. Okay. So tables. Here you can see a student, current student, old student, weekday student, and weekend student got created. So we inserted value in weekday student. Let's see, is that value is there? Inserted value in the weekday student. Is that value is there in student and current student also? So let's see. Let's start from student. Yes, here is it is. Value is inside student, but we have inserted only in the weekday student. Current student value also got inserted inside the current student. Let's see in weekday student. Weekday student. So every table is bounded with the foreign key. In the current student, CID is 1, which is CID is bounded with the foreign key of student column SID. So for 1, here is the value for 1. For the SID 1, which is bounded with weekdays student ID column 1, here is the value. So what happened right here, value for inserted into the student table, then in the current student, then the weekday student. But what will happen if we are going to insert the value inside the student? That value is not going to come inside the weekday or current student. Let's see by inserting inside the student. So let me comment these lines. I am inserting value inside the student new Kumar So I'm running this. Here you go. Let's see what will happen. Value only got inserted inside the student. Insert into the student. So for student 2, which is Kumar, value got inserted. Is this value is present inside the current student? Value that we inserted inside the student, is it available inside the current student? No, it is not available. Look, there is no values. Also in weekday student, there is no value. So whatever going to insert inside the subclass, lowest class, is going to first inserted inside the student and current student. Likewise, if we insert inside the weekend student, first it will get inserted inside the student and current student. If we insert inside the old student, then that value is going to get inserted inside the student first, then inside the old student. So this is all table per subclass mapping is. Table per subclass. For every class, per subclass, there is going to be a table. And when we are going to insert value inside the weekday student, that value is going to get inserted inside the student and current student, then inside the weekday student. So this is table per subclass. Table per subclass. But in case of second type, table per class mapping of inheritance mapping, table per class mapping, there is only going to be one table of every field. Suppose in a student we have CID and CNAME, and in current student we have role. So CID, CNAME, role, or maybe phone in old student, every column is going to be get created inside the single table. Like right here, you can see for every class we got different classes, different tables. But what will happen in the case of table per class mapping? Only one single table will be created. Like right here, you can see what is happening. We have SID, email, name, phone in student, and inside current student we have batch, time, CID. So what will happen in this case? Table per subclass mapping, which is of type second, batch, time, CID, which is inside the current student, is also going to be available inside this table. So every field inside the different classes or different table is going to be available inside the single table. You can see here. In a student, suppose we have name and phone. In current student, we have batch and time. So name and phone and batch and time and their corresponding columns of these four, name, phone, and batch and time columns, are going to be inside the single table, not inside the different tables like here. Name and phone are inside the different table of a student, and time and batch are inside the different table current student. Everything will be in the same table. These variables, batch, time in weekend student, weekday batch, time, weekday batch, every column will be generated in a single table. This will happen inside the table per class mapping. So we will go through table per class mapping code in the next video. So stay tuned.